I missed the bell. Under order of resolutions, House Resolution 458, offered by Representative Nichols. Take your time, Representative. Representative Nichols is recognized.
All righty. Whew, that was quite a sprint there, leader man. I mean, like, you usually be my friend, but okay. Welcome back, everybody. Whereas the members of the Illinois House of Representatives wish to congratulate Jeanette Anderson on the occasion of her retirement from the Illinois Chamber of Commerce on November 7, 2023, after 40 years of service. And whereas Jeanette Anderson attended Simeon High School for 2 years and then Jones Commercials High School, where she completed a 2-year program allowing students to obtain skilled office work experience, graduating in 1976. And whereas Jeanette Anderson started working as a receptionist for the Chamber of Commerce in downtown Chicago, holding that position for 15 years. And whereas Jeanette Anderson was then promoted to membership, the membership department as a secretary, and whereas Jeanette Anderson assumed the duties of supervisor of financial transactions for the finance department in 1999, and whereas Jeanette Anderson assumed the duties of office manager in 2001, and while still holding that position, she was promoted to the assistant to the chief operating officer in 2015, and whereas Jeanette Anderson was promoted to her current position as the administration and membership manager in 2023. And whereas Jeanette Anderson has 2 daughters, 5 granddaughters, 1 sister, 2 brothers, 3 nieces, and 1 nephew. And whereas in her free time, Jeanette Anderson enjoys sewing, barbecuing, I'm gonna get some of that, and assembling products. Therefore, be it resolved by the House of Representatives of the 103rd General Assembly of the State of Illinois that we congratulate Jeanette Anderson on the occasion of her retirement from the Illinois Chamber of Commerce on November 7, 2023, after 40 years of service. And be it resolved that a suitable copy of this resolution be presented to Jeanette Anderson as a symbol of our esteem and respect. It just lets us know that even in this day and age, you can work your way up to the top of a major chamber of commerce and run it. Jeanette, thank you so much for everything you've done for the state of Illinois. We love you and enjoy the rest of your time in Springfield. Thank you.
Representative Nichols moves for the adoption of House Resolution 458. All those in favor say aye. Opposed say nay. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the resolution is adopted. On page 2 of the calendar, House Bill 4148, offered by Speaker Welch. Mr. Clerk, please read the bill.
House Bill 4148, a bill for next in government. This bill was read a second time previously. No commitments. Floor Amendment number 1, offered by Speaker Welch, has been approved for consideration.
Speaker Welch on the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd ask for adoption of House Amendment number 1, and we can debate it on third reading.
Speaker Welch moves for the adoption of floor amendment number 1. All those in favor say aye. Opposed say nay. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment is adopted. Mr. Clerk, any further amendments?
No further amendments to motions are filed.
Third reading. Mr. Clerk, please read the bill.
House Bill 4148, a bill for next in government. Third reading this House bill.
Speaker Welch.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members of the House, I rise today to present House Bill 4148. This bill is the culmination of months of diligent research and thorough conversation. It's been a collaborative effort to ensure that we get it right, because upon passage of both chambers and signing by the governor, this bill will be historic legislation. This legislation will allow legislative employees in the House and Senate to organize and bargain collectively through representatives of their choosing for the first time in our state's history. Something I've remained firm on is that this legislation must give employees equal opportunity to join a union and make their voices heard. That's why I wanted to ensure that we included Democratic and Republican staff in both chambers, as well as nonpartisan staff that are critical to the legislative process. I'm not sure if everyone here knows that we have almost 200 hardworking employees that work behind the scenes that make this place go. We are nothing without these almost 200 employees. We have janitors that do an amazing job of keeping this place immaculate. We have our clerks that, without our clerks, I don't know what we would do. And the IT people, most of us still are learning how to turn our computers on. Thank God for our IT people. Thank God for our doorkeepers who keep us safe. There's a whole lot of people here that deserve equal opportunity to join a union. This legislation creates the Office of State Legislative Labor Relations, which will be responsible for negotiating agreements. Because of the nature of the work we do here in this building, though, this legislation also has some exclusions. Consistent with the Public Labor Relations Act, existing law, the bill exempts specific high-level policy positions, confidential employees, managerial employees, and supervisors. We've also put in some parameters regarding what can and cannot be bargained for, such as qualifications and elections of members of the General Assembly, choosing leadership of committee chairs, and the establishment of committees. All of this coincides with our current labor laws, as well as what we're seeing in other states that are navigating this very issue. We've seen it in the state of Oregon in 2021. We just saw it in the state of California this past month, where it passed the legislature and the governor signed it into law. And we also saw it in the state of Washington. But it's also happening in other states as well. As I did yesterday in committee, I also want to, though, take a moment in this chamber to publicly recognize and thank our staff for making us think again. It's okay to think again. When we pause and think again, we can learn new ways of doing things. We can get fresh perspectives on how those things can be done. And so I think it's important that we thank our staffers from my office who brought this discussion forward last November. I thought they were courageous, and I want you to know that these employees have been heard, that we support these employees. And honestly, I believe they should be applauded. Brady Burton, Kelly Kupris, Logan Arms, Mike Wazalewski, and all those behind this effort to help us think again. Can we give them a round of applause, please? I believe in workers' rights and always will believe in workers' rights. And that's exactly why I'm standing here introducing this monumental piece of legislation. To all of our staff, you make our work possible. Thank you for what you do. You keep this place running and you help us deliver results for the people of this great state. And I think all of our staff deserves a round of applause. Thank you for what you do. Madam Speaker, I'm going to open up for questions, but I just want to, kind of front what was in the amendment, because I know this bill was the result of several meetings. We took a lot of things into consideration from those meetings. We met with our staff who are part of ILSA. We met with House GOP staff. We met with Senate Dems. We met with our staff again. And as a result of that, we did come up with an amendment that was filed last night. That amendment makes various technical changes and changes for conformity with the Illinois Public Labor Relations Act. There were some things that I honestly believe were drafting errors that we just missed. Some of the other changes include moving up the effective date for the creation of the actual Office of State Legislative Labor Relations to July 1st of 2025. Have the office in place before the actual effective date of the remainder of the bill of July 1st of 2026. I also think it was important to recognize the importance of, getting this law into effect, but we also want to make sure we have a sustainable on-ramp to prepare for these changes. This amendment also removes the weighted vote method of appointment of the director of the office. That was raised in committee yesterday. It was raised in meetings that I talked about that occurred in the last month. It clarifies that newly elected officials are not obligated to continue employing their predecessor staff after turnover in an election. And we have added a severability clause. There are several changes that we've added specifically as a result of the great conversations we've had with our staff, including we changed the number of days notice required to strike to 5, down from 30, to be consistent with the Public Labor Relations Act. And so I'm thankful for everyone who has helped us shape this historic piece of legislation. I'm certain we will continue working on it in the Senate, but I am happy to take questions here today.
Chair recognizes Leader Spain.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Will the sponsor yield?
He indicates that he will.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for being here today, and just have a few questions. I'll start with the amendment. So I understand the fair share language, that may have been something you were referring to related to Janus. I don't know if that was a drafting error or not, but that is now removed, correct?
That was removed.
Okay.
That was language that the Janus decision found unconstitutional, and in conformance with that Supreme Court opinion, we took it out of this bill. Okay.
You mentioned removal of the weighted vote for the selection of the director of the Office of State Legislative Labor Relations. There was sort of a two-part weighting in the original drafting of the bill, both a weighting based on the size of each caucus and then an additional weighting. Have both of those weighted provisions been removed?
At your suggestion yesterday, yes.
Thank you. And I do appreciate that. It's consistent with many of the other bipartisan, bicameral framework that we have in place in the General Assembly. And thank you for the clarification on if there is turnover in an office and the retainage of that staff. And I also greatly appreciate, on behalf of the bipartisan, bicameral members that work within JCAR, some of the exemptions for the rulemaking process as well, which continues some of the negotiations that take place at a legislative level and then move forward. I had some questions about, well, let me start first, and some of these things we just may not have the answers to yet. They may be subject to bargaining, but right now, you as the Speaker, or Leader McCombie as the Republican leader, has a broad discretion in time served, work hours and conditions for employees, or even, after we adjourn session in May, there may be staff is given a day off work to catch up and recuperate. How will things like that going forward? Will you maintain that flexibility, or is that a subject of bargaining now?
The bill outlines things that are specifically not subject to bargaining. So I'll defer you to the bill.
I just don't know the answer to that. I haven't seen that in the bill, Mr. Speaker. Do you? And as a follow-up, will there be? We will have exempt employees and non-exempt, and will there be any differences in? Would you as Speaker be able to offer a day off or a flexible work policy if that's not available and agreed to in the bargaining within the unionized staff?
Well, in practice, typically what happens with employees who are not in a bargaining unit, you typically follow what is in a collective bargaining unit.
Right. Okay.
To be consistent.
You talked about the notification for strike moving from 30 days down to 5. Is there still language in the bill that protects or restricts the ability to strike during months in which the legislature is in session?
That language remained in the bill.
Okay. And then if there were a strike, we talked in committee about other bargaining units that have an impact on the public's health, safety, welfare, and well-being. Police officers, firefighters use interest arbitration as a resolution instead of the ability to strike. What would be the treatment towards interest arbitration for unionized legislative staff?
Well, this bill gives them the ability to strike. However, they cannot strike during months where session days are scheduled. You were here, a number of folks were here during the 736 unprecedented days of a budget impasse, and we all saw what that did to organizations and communities across this state. I don't think there's anyone in this chamber that ever wants us to go through that situation again. And so this is a nod toward recognizing a union, but in this unique space, there are some things that we have to consider. All of us are going to leave this place one day, and when we're gone, we want to set up a system that's going to still allow government to work. And so we give them that right to strike, just not during months where session days are scheduled.
Okay, I understand. I had a question about our district office staff, and there would be a separate bargaining unit for district office staff. I see that you created some exemptions or clarified them in the amendment that excludes district office chief of staffs and deputy chief of staffs. Are there any requirements associated with those positions? Is there an overall staffing requirement in a district office? In other words, do I need to have X number of employees in my office before I could employ a chief of staff?
No.
Okay, so there's flexibility then for individual members and how they would choose to operate their district office. Is there an ability for a member to pay an exempted employee in their district office above the scale that is established within the bargaining unit?
If they are exempt from collective bargaining, they can pay them whatever they want to pay them.
And if
they're
they're in
part
the
of the
bargaining unit,
That's subject to collective bargaining.
they're at the scale. Okay. Madam Speaker, to the bill.
To the bill.
Speaker Welch, thank you for answering my questions. I appreciate many of the adjustments that you made in the amendment that were a result of our discussion in committee yesterday. I think this is a really interesting topic. I think we certainly all appreciate the incredible work that is done by the staff. Every single person that is part of making this government work, we all rely on our staff who all do an incredible job. I know it's a tough job. I know it includes a lot of hard work, a lot of late nights. I don't know if this bill becomes law, if we could expect to see some changes in how our business works as a House. Maybe that could be a very good thing. I'm one who believes and could point to many examples of all-nighters here in this chamber or at the Bank of Springfield Center that, in my opinion, have not resulted in very good outcomes at a policy level, and they certainly weren't very good environment for our staff to work. I don't know what this bill will do to change those realities for our staff or for the decisions we make in this chamber, but look forward to continuing the discussion and seeing what steps happen next. I do think that there are a lot of questions here, and I don't know that any of us will have all the answers to them, and there may very well be some unintended consequences that we will learn about as we go. But Mr. Speaker, thank you for your time today.
Chair recognizes Leader Windhurst.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Will the sponsor yield?
He indicates that he will.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I appreciate you bringing this bill forward. I have some questions primarily around how these changes will impact in-district staff. Currently, in-district staff is employed by whom?
The representative.
Are they deemed employees of the clerk's office currently, under current law?
Technically, yes.
Technically, they are employees of the clerk's office, but we are given broad discretion on hiring and firing, wages, working conditions as an at-will employee.
Yes.
If this bill were to become law, who would be the employer of in-district staff?
That relationship doesn't change.
So technically, the individual in-district staff would be employees of the clerk's office?
Technically, yes.
Okay. So issues such as administrative costs, IRS reporting, workers' compensation, insurance, all those issues would continue to remain as they currently do?
Yeah, I don't see anything that changed, what that relationship would look like.
But for purposes of collective bargaining, if this becomes law, they would be considered employees of each individual legislator. Is that accurate?
Leader, I'm going to use an analogy that my chief counsel has been using in this discussion. And the analogy he's been using is the NFL, where you have the National Football League, which is governed by a collective bargaining agreement. There's an overall structure that every NFL franchise has to follow. But we know that each individual franchise is run very differently. The Green Bay Packers, unfortunately, are very different than the Chicago Bears. You know, they win a lot more than we do. And that's based on how the organizations are run. Each district office will still have that ability to run individually, have its own personality, but what the collective bargaining agreement will do for those employees who are subject to the collective bargaining unit, they would have to operate within that framework.
Thank you. One other question that has been raised, just to get some clarification on. The in-district staff would still be technically employed by the clerk's office, but would be deemed for purposes of collective bargaining individual legislators' employees. Does that in any way change or affect the liability of legislators if we are sued for any employment practice that occurs in the office? So if you're dealing with staff who's employed by the clerk's office or technically the state, they would sue the state. The individual legislator would not have any liability. Does this change by referring to them as being employed by the individual legislator impact personal liability?
I don't believe it changes the legal relationship.
And if such a suit were to occur, would legal representation be provided to our individual legislators, or will we be responsible to provide our own legal representation?
Well, I think the answer to that question is very similar to what we do now. I think you have to examine each case on a case-by-case basis, make sure we're aware of the facts, seek opinion of the councils of the respective caucuses, seek opinions of the Attorney General. That's what we do now. Nothing's going to change when this becomes law.
And as it relates to in-district staff and their right to strike, if in-district staff as a union votes to strike, that would impact every legislative office in this state. Is that correct?
Yes.
So even if offices, obviously we employ just a few people, one or two people, they may not want to strike. They would be obligated to strike if the whole union voted to strike.
If they're not exempt employees, and under the amendment, a chief of staff, a deputy chief of staff, or a functional equivalent would be exempt. If they're not exempt and they're part of the collective bargaining unit, and in your hypothetical, if there is a strike, they get to go on strike too. That's how collective bargaining works.
Yes, but even if they don't want to strike, they're obligated to strike. Would be also the counter to that.
Unless they want to walk across the picket line.
Yeah.
I don't encourage that, but that's their right.
As it relates to the wages that are paid to unionized employees, is it the intention that those will still be paid out of the legislator's district allotment?
Yes.
Thank you. Appreciate your answers to my questions.
My pleasure.
Chair recognizes Leader Davids-Meyer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Will the Speaker yield?
He indicates that he will.
I want to go back on a couple things really quick. So if you pay your legislative staff, a brand new member of legislative staff, $35,000 a year, and mine is getting paid $45,000 a year, if the collectively bargained rate is less than the 45, will my staff member lose wages?
If there's a collective bargaining unit in place, and if the employees are subject to the collective bargaining unit, that's what salary would control.
So it's possible they could lose salary.
In your hypothetical, it's possible.
I mean, to be fair, I'm sure that we have a number of legislative staff, and I'm talking about district staff mostly. You know, mine may not necessarily do more, but do different things than staff in other districts. But they're going to come up with a wage rate for each and every legislative staff, no matter if they live in Chicago with a higher cost of living or in Murrayville with a lower cost of living.
Let me emphasize the language that's in the amendment. You, as the legislator, have the authority to hire a chief of staff, a deputy chief of staff, or a functional equivalent. If that's what you do, that position would be exempt from the bargaining unit. I mean, we're not even having this discussion. Pay them whatever you want. Pay them your entire allotment if you want. If
as
they're
well as
part
the
of the
additional
collective bargaining unit, the way a collective bargaining unit works is those are the negotiated salaries, and that's what they would get paid.
It is certainly possible for a member of staff to have a decrease in wage. So in committee, we discussed, I asked a couple questions about this. You've never had the privilege of serving in the minority party. Unfortunately, I think everybody should have that opportunity at some time in their career, in their life. Our staff often operates at a disadvantage because they haven't had the opportunity to sit at the table during negotiations, whether it's budget, whether it's some of the larger bills that we deal with that are sometimes rushed through. So our staff is tasked with the job of figuring out why something is written a certain way. Not only that, but going through page by page to figure out what changes were actually made. And I want to just get this on the record that you assure us that when, say, the Safety Act is passed at 2:30 in the morning, that our staff will have ample time to review that within the constraints of time. Because we know that one of the gripes from members of your staff has been the hours and sometimes the working conditions. So I just want to make sure that we are given ample amount of time, because at 2:30 in the morning, they may not be able to call an association or something like that to get the background of why something was written a certain way.
As I said to you yesterday in committee, since I've been speaker, I have been committed to making this place run better. We have continued to improve our processes, continued to try to do better, continued to try to give you more time to read bills. We were very intentional about doing our budget different than we've ever done it before. And instead of using that ample time to read the budget, you wrapped it in a bow and stuck it on the desk. I would have recommended you use that ample time instead of wrapping it in a bowl to read the budget.
I didn't wrap any budget in any.
If you read the budget, you would have seen in that document that you voted no to, that your caucus of 40 members get the same amount of money that our caucus gets with 78. Your members are getting paid more money than our members, staff, because you have the same amount of money that we do, even though you vote no. Don't talk to me about fairness. We're here trying to do something better for our staff. But what is really wrong here is that your staff makes more than my staff and you don't even vote for the budget. Think about what's wrong with that. Think about what's wrong with that.
And apparently we haven't had issues with staff retention that your side has
Because
had.
Democrats vote for a budget that pay them.
And you're the ones having issues with retention. So
You have retention issues too, Representative, but they're less because Democrats vote for a budget that give you the same amount of money that we have to run a much larger staff. So just do the math. Now, next year when I ask you to put votes on the budget, I'm going to recommend you put votes on the budget. Again,
I'd be
Well, we're gonna make
happy to
some
work
changes.
with you if we're involved in the negotiations, but this isn't about the budget.
It is about the budget. It has a lot to do with the budget.
A question that I asked you yesterday, in your discussions with Senate President Harmon, you said you spoke with him prior to filing the original bill.
That is correct.
Have you had discussions with him prior to filing this current amendment?
We, staff to staff, have had conversations.
Have you gotten any understanding of where his caucus is on this bill? Because generally on larger bills that deal with that affect both sides a little bit more, generally there's a little bit more tracking of where votes may be. Do you have any understanding of where his caucus will be?
As Speaker of the House, I've been working to understand where my caucus was on this issue, understanding where my staff was on this issue. We have had several conversations with staff in the other chamber. We're going to commit to continuing to have those conversations when this bill is over in the Senate. We're going to allow the legislative process to work. This is a House bill. We've had a lot of conversations. Those conversations are reflected in the amendment. Will there be more conversations? I presume so. But has there been an agreement? No.
So we do not
Legislative
have
process is
agreement.
working.
Sorry to interrupt.
Legislative process is working.
So we do not have an agreement with the other side on this bill.
No.
Okay. So will you continue to work this bill on the other side?
I think this bill is an excellent bill. That's why I'm standing here presenting it. It's my hope that they would just pass it as is. But I recognize and respect the other chamber's right to take this through their process, to caucus with their caucuses. If they make changes, we're going to work through it with them.
I would say probably generally on a bill that's taken this seriously, that the negotiations between the two sides are generally a little bit closer. I'm not sure that this bill is soup. I'm not sure that it's legitimate. I don't know where it's going to go in the Senate, and I know we don't always know where it's going to go in the Senate, but generally on things like this, we see the writing on the wall and the direction it's going. At this point, I think there's a lot of changes that need to be made, a lot of things that haven't been thought of. So I look forward to seeing how this vote goes.
Chair recognizes Leader McCombie.
Thank you. To the bill.
To the bill.
So tired of hearing about how we don't vote for the budget, because there have been Republicans that have voted for a budget. And our office reached out to your office every week except for a couple. Sat down with you, asked about a budget. Before we had a budget, and we're going to keep rehashing this, the question was, how many votes? How many votes? How many votes? What's the budget? What's the budget? What's the budget? Deputy Leader and I sat here till 9:30 at night, showed up for meetings. There were no meetings. Your own caucus wasn't aware of what was in the budget before you sat with the governor and spoke with the governor and the president of the Senate of what was in the budget. We all know this, so let's knock it off. It's fine. If you don't want us in negotiations, so be it. We get it. We're the minority. There's 40 of us. That's fine. This is about staff. That's right. But our staff staffs the same amount of committees that your staff does, without the insights of what's going to be called in those said committees. So if you're talking about having respect for staff, then have respect for staff and give ours a heads up. And like you said, we do it with less. Our staff works very hard, and so does yours, and we appreciate that. We work through our issues with our staff. Our staff has an issue with pay. Our staff has an issue with benefits. Our staff has an issue with flex scheduling. We sit down with our staff and we figure it out. That's what good leaders do. So sick of hearing about the budget. We want to vote on a budget. We want to sit at the table. You know what we don't want to hear? When Leader Durkin negotiates a capital bill with Speaker Madigan and puts 20 Republicans on a capital bill, and we get our proportion of said capital bill, and there's $41.8 million still sitting out there, and the current speaker says to me, forget it, not my bill, not my deal, not my deal, get over it, move on. That's not how we do business in Springfield. You want agreed processes, you want things done right here in Springfield, then behave properly. This is really about staff. You would have taken it back to committee like the staff asked you to. And you also would have worked with the Senate. This isn't about all 4 caucuses. Do better.
Speaker Welch to close.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members of the House. I want to, again, thank our staff for helping us think again. I want to thank the lady standing to my left who spent all summer answering the call, the charge, to do the research, to be diligent and thorough, to help us do better. And I'm grateful for the work that Kendra Piercy did to get us here today. Can we give Kendra a round of applause, please? And I said this yesterday, and I'm gonna just say it again here today, that everyone here knows that I like to talk about our why. And I want to talk about why I'm standing here today sponsoring this bill to allow all General Assembly employees to unionize. I told the story about my dad, how he worked in a union most of his life. And when my parents bought their first house in Bellwood, Illinois, shortly after that, my dad's company decided it was going to move the company to Georgia, a right-to-work state. They said he would still have a job, but it wouldn't be a union job. My dad put it to a vote, asked the family, what do we want to do? And the family voted to stay in Illinois. I don't know if I'd be standing here if we didn't stay in Illinois. But my dad was unemployed because of that family vote. And in order for my dad to pay for that new mortgage, to continue to take care of our family, he had to work 2 full-time jobs to make the same amount of money he made in 1 union job. I watched my dad go to work at one company from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. and drive from 2 to 3 p.m. to the next one and work 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. at the second job. Every day. Just so he can take care of his family. So, I can tell you why I believe in unions. I can tell you why I believe in the right to collectively bargain. I can tell you why I believe in the American dream. I can tell you that because unions have always provided a path for people to do better, a path to the middle class. I saw what it did for my family. I've seen what it does for so many families across this state. That's why I fought, along with so many people on this side of the aisle, for the passage of the Workers' Rights Amendment. This is a workers' rights state. We will never, ever be the state of Georgia. Right to work is wrong. Always has been, always will be. We believe in workers' rights. And yes, I think we can always do better. And since becoming Speaker, knowing that we have had staff issues for a long time, not just on the Democratic side, in all 4 caucuses. These issues have gone on for a long time. So I have tried to address them even without a union in place. Since becoming Speaker, we have worked hard to make the environment here better. We have restructured our office so that employees have clearer and better job descriptions. This way they know exactly what their responsibilities are. Believe it or not, in 2018, job descriptions didn't exist. We've given raises every year to get salaries up to a better livable wage and raised the base salary nearly every year for most positions. And that effort is ongoing. To be more specific, from 2020 to today, legislative assistants from 2020, I want to make sure you're understanding the timeline here. From 2020 to today, legislative assistants have received a 43% increase in salary. Research analysts have received about a 23% increase since 2020. Same with the communications specialists, same with the legislative coordinators. And our janitors have received a 22% increase since 2020. Our employees have day one benefits. For most of our employees, there's no more probationary period. For those few positions that do still have a probationary period, we have made sure that we provide 100% reimbursement for their health insurance that they purchase. You know what? 2 summers ago, that was not the case, but it is the case today. The majority of our employees get health and pension benefits on the first day, on day one. This was the right thing to do, especially when we were existing in the period of COVID. But we can do better. We can always do better. And that's why I think it is important that we think again. Like Adam Grant, the writer, says, like Steve Jobs says, think different. We can be better if we think different. We can be better. But what's happening here and what you continue to see play out on the floor from time to time is that you see some people playing a finite, an infinite game with a finite mindset. And let me explain what I mean by that. In a finite game, people play to win or lose, like football, baseball, golf, soccer. There's always a winner and loser. That's a finite game. But here, when we come here, this is an infinite game. Everyone in this room is going to be replaced or move on. There's going to be someone else here, but the business of government is going to go on with new people. What we have to do is play this infinite game with an infinite mindset and have a just cause and say, what can we do when we're thinking and rethinking to make this place go better? What can we do? We can't be afraid of change. To ask yourself what's best for me is finite thinking. To ask yourself what's best for us is infinite thinking. This bill is infinite thinking. I'm thankful for those employees for challenging us. You don't know it, but you're going to be challenged too. Every single caucus. And I think you should think different. I think you should think infinitely and join us in the infinite game and pass HB 4148. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The question is, shall House Bill 4148 pass? All in favor vote aye. Opposed vote nay. The voting is open. Have all voted who wish? Have all voted who wish? Have all voted who wish? Mr. Clerk, please take the record. On this question, there are 74 voting in favor, 35 voting opposed, 4 voting present, and this bill, having received a constitutional majority, is hereby declared passed. Chair recognizes Leader Buckner. For what reason do you seek recognition?
Point of personal privilege, please.
Please proceed.
Madam Speaker, I would just like to acknowledge yesterday we took some time to welcome back Representative Will Davis. I want to welcome back Representative Thaddeus Jones, who is joining us today for the first time in a while. Welcome back, Representative Jones.
So good to see you both. Chair recognizes Leader Winhurst.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Inquiry of the chair. What is the status of H.R. 446, Support for Israel Resolution?
Mr. Clerk.
H.R. 446 is in the Rules Committee.
Mr. Clerk, agreed resolutions.
Agreed resolutions. House Resolution 456, offered by Representative Smith. House Resolution 457, offered by Representative Costa Howard. House Resolution 459, offered by Representative Johnson. House Resolution 461, offered by Representative Nichols. And House Resolution 462, offered by Representative West.
Leader Gable moves for the adoption of agreed resolutions. All in favor say aye. Opposed say nay. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the agreed resolutions are adopted. Mr. Clerk, please read the adjournment resolution.
House Joint Resolution Number 43, offered by Representative Gable, resolved by the House Representatives, the 103rd General Assembly of the State of Illinois, the Senate concurring herein, that when the House Representatives adjourns on Wednesday, October 25th, 2023, it stands adjourned until Tuesday, November 7th, 2023, until the call of the Speaker. And when the Senate adjourns on Thursday, October 26th, 2023, it stands adjourned until Tuesday, November 7th, 2023, until the call of the President.
Leader Gable moves for the adoption of adjourned resolution. All those in favor say aye. Opposed say nay. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the adjournment resolution is adopted. And now, allowing perfunctory time for the clerk, Leader Gable moves the House stand adjourned until Tuesday, November 7th. All those in favor say aye. Opposed say nay. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the House stands adjourned.